You're listening to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, created to help you succeed in your educational journey. Learn more at baremetalcyber.com, where additional prepcasts, books, and training materials await. Let's get started. Transparency in agile work is not a one-time activity, but a continuous practice of making intent, status, risks, and decisions visible as they unfold. The orientation is that timely, routine sharing should be the default operating mode, not something done occasionally or only under pressure. By continuously publishing the state of work, teams reduce uncertainty, foster trust, and enable faster coordination across stakeholders. Without transparency, gaps in information are filled by rumor, assumptions, or repeated status requests that slow down decision-making. With transparency, everyone operates from the same evidence, reducing friction and misalignment. Importantly, transparency is not about producing glossy reports or dashboards that paint everything green. It is about honesty, even when the picture is mixed or difficult. By making sharing routine and evidence-based, organizations strengthen credibility and create a culture where decisions respond to reality rather than filtered narratives. The principles of continuous sharing emphasize that small, frequent updates are more powerful than infrequent, high-stakes reports. Just as learning benefits from short feedback loops, transparency benefits from regular flows of information. A daily note on blockers, a weekly outcome summary, or a quick change log does more to align stakeholders than quarterly reports that arrive too late to change direction. Frequent updates reduce the latency between reality and decision, giving stakeholders a chance to respond early rather than after damage is done. This rhythm also lowers the stress of reporting, since each update is lightweight and focused rather than a production effort. Transparency thrives when updates are treated as routine maintenance of alignment rather than performance theater. By embedding frequent sharing into normal cycles, organizations reduce information bottlenecks and ensure decisions are always anchored in the latest reality. A single source of truth consolidates the diverse artifacts of delivery into a coherent whole. Roadmaps, boards, decision records, and dashboards should all connect to the same data and definitions so that audiences see the same facts regardless of channel. Without consolidation, different stakeholders may rely on different reports, each with subtle variations that cause confusion. For example, if a product roadmap shows one date but a portfolio report shows another, credibility collapses. A single source of truth prevents this by making consistency non-negotiable. Updates flow into one central artifact, and all views derive from it. This principle does not mean one format fits all. Rather, it ensures that every representation reflects the same foundation. By centralizing truth, transparency protects trust and ensures that debates are about decisions, not about whose numbers are correct. A single source makes alignment faster and more resilient. Definitions and tags make transparency precise by standardizing the language used to describe status. Labels such as blocked, at risk, or ready must mean the same thing across artifacts and teams. Without consistent definitions, updates create more churn than clarity, as stakeholders argue over what terms imply. For example, if one team marks an item blocked when waiting for review, while another only uses the term for external dependencies, the aggregated view is incoherent. Standard tags also make it easier to search, filter, and analyze updates across the organization. They create shared vocabulary that reduces misinterpretation and speeds decisions. Definitions should be clear, concise, and documented in metric dictionaries or status guidelines. By embedding consistency, organizations ensure that transparency communicates meaning reliably, not ambiguously. Cadence commitments establish predictable times for posting updates and reviewing questions, balancing the need for signal with the risk of noise. Predictability builds trust because stakeholders know when to expect new information and when to engage. For example, teams may commit to publishing daily notes before stand-up, weekly outcome summaries on Fridays, and portfolio updates monthly. These commitments allow stakeholders to plan their attention and avoid the fatigue of ad hoc messages at random times. Cadence also prevents bursts of overcommunication followed by silence, which fuel rumor cycles. By keeping transparency rhythmic and predictable, organizations create calm and confidence. Cadence commitments are promises of communication discipline, ensuring that updates are timely but not overwhelming. They create the stability necessary for transparency to feel like a service rather than a disruption. Audience tuning adapts the depth of updates to different needs without diverging from the shared source of truth. Executives may require headline summaries that highlight impact and risks, while teams need actionable detail on tasks, dependencies, and acceptance. Audience tuning is not about creating different facts for different groups, but about presenting the same truth at appropriate resolution. For example, the same update may produce a short narrative for executives, increment achieved goal, adoption rising, risk mitigated, while the team view includes detailed telemetry and backlog adjustments. This tuning respects stakeholder time and ensures relevance without fragmenting consistency. By tailoring communication while preserving coherence, transparency scales across levels of the organization. Everyone sees the same evidence, but at the depth that serves their role. Risk transparency strengthens alignment by publishing assumptions, early indicators, and mitigation steps openly. Instead of hiding risks until they become incidents, teams surface them early so stakeholders can help address them. For example, a team might note, assumption, vendor API will remain stable. Early indicator, response latency rising. Mitigation, parallel testing in progress. Sharing risks in this structured way prevents surprises and enables coordinated action. It also creates trust, as stakeholders see that risks are managed responsibly rather than ignored. Risk transparency flips the culture from blame to collaboration. The sooner risks are visible, the sooner they can be reduced collectively. By making risk updates part of routine transparency, organizations turn uncertainty into shared vigilance rather than hidden anxiety. Decision logs capture the context, options, rationale, and owners for significant choices. Transparency is not only about what is happening now, but also about how past decisions were made. Without records, stakeholders may relitigate choices repeatedly, relying on memory or hearsay. Decision logs prevent this by documenting why one path was chosen over another. For example, a log might state, decision, launch with feature flags. Options, full release versus staged rollout. Rationale, mitigate risk of scale issues. Owner, product lead. This record makes the decision auditable and defensible. It also accelerates alignment, as new stakeholders can understand history without revisiting debates. Decision logs make organizational memory visible, reinforcing transparency as continuity. Change narratives explain scope, sequence, or date adjustments in outcome terms. Plans evolve, but credibility is preserved when changes are explained clearly and honestly. For instance, instead of simply stating that a feature is delayed, a narrative might explain, date moved 2 weeks to incorporate security compliance review, ensuring safe launch. Framing changes in terms of outcomes rather than excuses reassures stakeholders that adjustments serve value, not negligence. Narratives also prevent rumor cycles, as stakeholders hear reasons directly rather than speculating. By embedding narratives into transparency, organizations show respect for stakeholders, need to understand why things shift. This builds resilience and trust, even when plans deviate from expectations. Privacy and confidentiality guardrails ensure that transparency does not compromise sensitive information. Not all data can or should be shared widely, especially when it involves personal, legal, or competitive details. Guardrails classify information and specify channels, balancing openness with duty of care. For example, general progress may be shared openly, but details of individual performance reviews remain confidential. By articulating these boundaries, organizations avoid both oversharing and undersharing. They show that transparency is thoughtful, not reckless. Guardrails protect trust by making openness safe and sustainable, aligning communication with ethical and legal responsibilities. Compliance-friendly transparency integrates required approvals and traceability links directly into updates. Instead of creating separate, slower reporting tracks for regulators or auditors, compliance evidence is woven into routine transparency. For example, an update might include a link to a signed approval or audit trail. This reduces duplication, accelerates readiness, and ensures that compliance is always up to date. Compliance-friendly practices turn oversight from a burden into a natural byproduct of transparency. They demonstrate that agility and accountability can coexist, with evidence maintained continuously rather than retrofitted under stress. By embedding compliance in daily updates, organizations align transparency with governance, reinforcing trust on all fronts. Remote-first norms protect inclusivity in distributed environments. Updates must be accessible asynchronously, searchable in shared repositories, and available in formats that support audio-first consumption and screen readers. By recording summaries and keeping threads searchable, organizations ensure that no location or time zone is privileged. For example, a remote stakeholder can review the same update and add questions later without missing alignment. Remote-first transparency levels the playing field, making openness accessible across geography, bandwidth, and ability. This practice prevents decisions from favoring those physically present or most vocal, preserving fairness. By making transparency remote-ready, organizations ensure that trust and alignment are global and inclusive, not local and exclusive. Feedback channels turn transparency into a two-way conversation rather than one-way broadcast. Updates should invite questions, clarifications, and dissent. For instance, after posting a change narrative, a team might provide a thread where stakeholders can ask for evidence or suggest alternatives. Feedback transforms updates from static announcements into living discussions that refine alignment. It also strengthens engagement as stakeholders feel their voices matter. Transparency without feedback risks becoming a performance. With feedback, it becomes collaboration. By embedding channels for dialogue, organizations ensure that transparency is responsive, adaptive, and trusted. Freshness indicators reinforce confidence by marking when each artifact was last updated and by whom. A visible last updated on timestamp allows observers to quickly judge whether information is current. For example, if a dashboard shows progress but was last updated 3 weeks ago, stakeholders know not to rely on it. Freshness signals reduce uncertainty and prevent reliance on stale data. They also reinforce accountability, as owners are visible. By embedding freshness indicators, transparency maintains credibility, even during fast-changing work. Stakeholders can trust not only what is displayed, but also how current it is. Anti-patterns in transparency warn of practices that undermine trust. Status theater, where dashboards show all green while teams quietly struggle, destroys credibility. Private site agreements that bypass published decisions create misalignment and resentment. Sporadic bursts of updates followed by silence fuel rumor cycles as stakeholders fill the gaps with speculation. These patterns turn transparency into illusion, eroding trust rather than building it. By naming and avoiding these traps, organizations preserve the honesty and consistency that make transparency valuable. True transparency is not about image, but about reality, even when it is uncomfortable. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other prepcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Daily micro-updates keep alignment tight without requiring large meetings. These updates capture movement, blockers, and next steps in a consistent format, often shared in team channels or status boards. For example, a daily note might say, 2 stories moved to verification, 1 blocked awaiting vendor input, next focus is error handling. These micro-updates are quick to produce and quick to consume, but their value lies in reducing latency between reality and action. Instead of stakeholders waiting for the next review or planning session, they see changes unfold daily. This rhythm reduces surprises and helps coordination without demanding constant synchronous conversations. Daily transparency becomes a habit, not a burden, embedding openness into the team's natural flow. Weekly outcome summaries complement micro-updates by zooming out to connect progress with increment goals and success signals. These summaries emphasize outcomes rather than activities, preventing drift into measuring busyness. For instance, instead of saying 5 features delivered, a summary might highlight checkout abandonment reduced by 10%. Weekly summaries are shared with teams and stakeholders, creating a cadence where alignment is refreshed without overwhelming detail. They also create a bridge between operational transparency and strategic alignment, showing how small steps accumulate into larger results. By focusing on outcomes, weekly summaries reinforce credibility and keep attention fixed on why the work matters. Risk and assumption trackers bring discipline to transparency by linking potential issues to owners and triggers. Each tracked assumption documents what must remain true, what early signals to watch for, and who is responsible for action. For example, a tracker might note: assumption, cloud provider maintains service level. Trigger, uptime drops below 99.5%. Owner, operations lead. Making these visible prevents surprises and spreads vigilance across the organization. Stakeholders know what could cause pivots, escalations, or added safeguards. Risk and assumption transparency transforms uncertainty into shared accountability, ensuring that all parties can act before issues turn into incidents. Dependency visibility is another crucial layer of transparency. Many increments rely on upstream or downstream teams, vendors, or partners. Visualizing these dependencies with clear dates, owners, and service expectations prevents hidden bottlenecks. For example, a team building a reporting dashboard may note: dependent on data warehouse schema update by March 15th, owner, analytics team. Publishing these needs openly allows partners to plan realistically and reduces the chance of last-minute delays. It also builds a sense of shared responsibility across teams, turning dependencies into managed commitments rather than hidden risks. Transparency about dependencies keeps flow predictable and coordination honest. Decision review cadence ensures that recent choices are surfaced and validated before work proceeds too far. Transparency is not just about reporting status, but also about revisiting key decisions. A regular rhythm, such as a weekly review of recent decisions, prevents drift and catches misalignment early. For example, if a scope change was made to simplify a release, stakeholders can validate that this adjustment is still acceptable before it becomes deeply embedded. This cadence also strengthens organizational memory, as decision logs are revisited and confirmed. By reviewing decisions openly, teams reduce relitigation and maintain alignment with current priorities. Board and backlog hygiene sustains the trustworthiness of transparency artifacts. Boards must reflect the current state of work, not a vague approximation. Backlog should be pruned to remove stale items and annotated to explain delays. For example, if a story lingers in progress for weeks, it should carry a note explaining why. This maintenance ensures that artifacts remain reliable guides rather than decorations. Poor hygiene undermines credibility and leads stakeholders to question whether transparency is genuine. By caring for boards and backlogs, teams keep transparency real, ensuring that what is displayed reflects actual work and decisions. Automation pipelines make transparency reliable by publishing telemetry snapshots, distributions, and percentiles on a schedule. This reduces manual effort and error while increasing consistency. For example, performance data might update automatically every 24 hours, ensuring that stakeholders always see the latest picture. Automation frees teams from repetitive reporting, allowing them to focus on interpretation and action. It also reduces the temptation to manipulate or delay updates. Pipelines institutionalize transparency, ensuring that signals flow predictably without depending on ad hoc human effort. This mechanization strengthens trust and scales transparency across larger organizations. Stakeholder briefs translate work information into implications for customers, support staff, and operations teams. Transparency should not stop with progress metrics. It should explain what the changes mean for those who must prepare. For example, a brief might state, "New feature launching next week." Support staff should expect a 10% increase in ticket volume initially. Communications plan is in place. These briefs enable readiness and coordination, ensuring that value is not only delivered but also absorbed successfully. They connect the flow of work with the broader system of adoption and operation, making transparency a bridge across functions. Incident and exception updates are critical moments of transparency. When things go wrong, trust depends on concise, factual communication about what happened, what is being done, and when the next update will arrive. For example, service outage detected at 2:15 p.m., cause under investigation, next update at 3 p.m. Such updates protect trust even during difficult periods, as stakeholders see that the organization is open and accountable. Silence or vague reassurances, by contrast, create anxiety and speculation. By normalizing incident transparency, organizations show that openness is not conditional on good news but is a core operating principle. Accessibility practices extend transparency to all participants. Updates should use plain language, avoiding jargon that excludes non-specialists. Formats must support audio-first consumption, captions, and screen readers to include those with different needs. For distributed or remote participants, updates must be available asynchronously and searchable. For example, a short written note paired with an audio recording ensures accessibility across contexts. By designing transparency to be inclusive, organizations prevent blind spots and disengagement. Accessibility turns transparency from a privilege of some into a right for all, reinforcing trust and equity. Measurement of transparency effectiveness closes the loop by checking whether sharing practices are working. Metrics might include the frequency of surprises, time to decision, or the amount of rework caused by miscommunication. For example, if escalations due to misunderstanding decline after adopting daily micro-updates, transparency is succeeding. Measuring effectiveness ensures that practices are not ritual but results-driven. It also enables improvement, as organizations can adjust cadence, format, or content in response to evidence. Transparency itself must be evidence-based, adapting to ensure that openness truly improves decision-making and flow. Recognition of transparent behaviors reinforces the norms that sustain openness. Praising individuals or teams for surfacing risks early, posting timely change logs, or maintaining clean decision records signals that these practices are valued. Recognition does not mean turning transparency into vanity metrics, but creating a culture where honesty and discipline are appreciated. For example, a manager might highlight in a retrospective that a team's candid risk disclosure allowed stakeholders to pivot quickly, avoiding wasted effort. By celebrating transparency, organizations encourage consistency and resilience, ensuring that the culture persists even under pressure. Pruning and renewal prevent transparency from collapsing under its own weight. Over time, templates and update channels can accumulate until the signal is buried in noise. Stewardship means retiring low-value updates, simplifying formats, and refreshing practices as needs evolve. For example, if a weekly report no longer informs decisions, it should be retired rather than maintained out of habit. Renewal keeps transparency lean and purposeful, preserving attention for what matters. By pruning regularly, organizations prevent fatigue and cynicism, keeping transparency a trusted tool rather than an overwhelming chore. Success signals confirm whether continuous transparency is delivering its intended outcomes. Indicators include fewer escalations caused by misunderstanding, faster alignment on changes, and steadier flow of work. For example, if stakeholders consistently report that they feel informed and prepared, transparency is functioning. If decision latency decreases and coordination improves, the practice is validated. These signals show that transparency is not just ritual but impact, turning updates into enablers of trust and effectiveness. Success signals provide the evidence that continuous sharing is worth the investment, reinforcing the discipline of openness as a driver of strategic alignment. Continuous transparency synthesizes all these practices into a system of trust and alignment. Predictable cadence ensures updates arrive when expected. Shared sources of truth and standardized definitions preserve consistency. Risk disclosures, decision logs, and change narratives create honesty about uncertainty and adaptation. Accessibility and remote-first norms ensure inclusivity, while pruning and measurement keep transparency lean and effective. Together, these elements transform openness from a vague aspiration into a disciplined operating mode. Transparency becomes the everyday infrastructure that keeps work aligned, decisions timely, and trust strong, ensuring that stakeholders act on real evidence rather than assumptions or rumor. Thanks for tuning in to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, your trusted source for cybersecurity news and insights. Remember to subscribe at baremetalcyber.com so you never miss an update. And visit cyberauthor.me for best-selling cybersecurity books that equip you with expert knowledge. Until next time, stay secure and stay vigilant.